Morning, everyone. Welcome back to the Pre-Pesach Learning Program here at the Young Israel Lawrence-Cedarhurst. I'd like to thank our corporate sponsor, Nathan Rosenberg, as well as our daily sponsor, Dr. Ashie and Elisa Diamond, in honor of Rabbi Baruch Kleiman and Ephraim Diamond and all the work they do in bringing more Torah to the community. Today we have this chus of hearing Aris from Rabbi Schreier. I'm sure a lot of you here are familiar with Rabbi. Growing up, I've actually had Sidarim with some of the Rabbanim in this community, and they're all very nice. But I was thinking about if there's one Seder that I would actually like to attend, it's actually Rabbi Ashie's Seder, because like Rabbi mentioned yesterday, the idea of Pesach is really recounting the story. The mitzvah is to recount the story. All these different Torah are all beautiful, and they give us more context as far as our relationship with the Yom Tov, and it also gives you some good talking points as far as the rest of the days of Yom Tov. But the night of the Seder is all about relaying the story. And if there's anybody that I know that can relay the story in an exciting way, Rav Ashie is the man. Without further delay, Rav Ashie.
I want to echo the thank you to the sponsors, and they say amazing things about this Rabbi Baruch Kleiman guy. I hear really good things about him, bringing some real amazing Torah to the community, and this whole program is such a Kiddush Hashem. So much work and effort and time goes into it. Thank you to Rabbi Ephraim, to Rabbi Baruch, to the entire team. It really is such an honor to be part of it, and to have my name on the roster with all the amazing Rabbanim that come to go and be part of this program. It really is very, very special. And I wish my kids felt the same way in terms of wanting to be at the Seder with Baruch Hashem. We have a great Sederim, and everyone gets this Sederim, because we always have to remember that when it comes to Seder night, our goal is to relive the story, right? It's not just a past experience which we're remembering. Our goal is to really feel it and to interact with it. And every time Rabbi Dr. Abraham J. Twersky talks about it all over the place, where he talks about the fact that everyone has their own Mitzrayim that they're trying to break out of. And I think we can relate to this in this day and age more than ever before. I know for myself, every text Sunday morning when I get the screen time text message and I see how much time I spent on my phone that week, it is humbling and embarrassing at the same time. Now, my job is okay, but still, I mean, how much of it is, thinking about productivity, thinking about what we are, in servitude to, and thinking back in our lives. And everyone's had situations where they felt like they've gotten freed from certain things, or maybe things have gone a certain way, or we are hoping that things can go in a certain way. There's certainly a lot to think about and daven for on Seder night. So I want to just talk about a few ideas, maybe the bookends of the Seder night experience, but just in the opposite way. I want to talk a little bit about B'dikas Chametz, which is, I know, obviously not part of the Seder, but leads us up to it. But then also talk about Nirtza, because I feel like not many people speak about Nirtza. There's so much to talk about in the rest of the Seder, but I want to talk about Nirtza. And the way I want to introduce by starting about Nirtza is we know that in Pirkei Avos, we talk about this concept of Hu Haya Omer. Whenever it says Hu Haya Omer, so the Mefarshim point out it's not just that this person happened to say, this is what the person lived, right? This is what the person would talk about every single time. Now, I know that I speak about the same thing just about every week. It's just a way of kind of couching in a different way. I was in Rabbi Sobolovsky's shiur for quite some time. He's Rosh Yeshiva in YU, big time Talmid Chacham. Everything that he would ever speak about, every drush always came back to the same thing, which was, you got to learn more and you got to push. And that's an amazing thing to push in a drasha. So it was always, he was talking about, I remember so clearly, we were talking as we were on our way to shiur one day, and he's like, Ashie, what do you think? If I go and I'm flying home for Tisha B'Av, he was an NCSY call for the summer. He said, if I fly home on this flight, so I can learn for 7 hours on the flight, and then I could come back, but then I won't be able to have a regular morning Seder, or I can go on a flight where I'm not going to learn as much, but then when I come home, I'll have a Seder. I'm like, Rabbi, whatever you do is going to be good. Don't worry about it. But that's his mind, that's his thoughts, and that's hopefully where we're going to get to in terms of thinking about learning all the time. But I'm always talking about the same idea, which is that we can't get too low on ourselves. We have to pump ourselves up. We have to recognize that there is so much that we're able to go and accomplish, and that, yes, we might fall, we might slip, but we got to be able to keep moving forward. Probably my favorite idea, yes, I have a lot of favorite ideas. I can't really talk about that. But one of my favorite ideas is when we talk about what's different about Jewish war. When we talk about Jewish war, it's not really necessarily related to Pesach, but I guess war and everything going on in the world. We know there's so much there. We know that Jews fight wars differently. We know that there's so many different elements to war. And the Torah tells us that there are certain people that are not allowed, are supposed to be on the battlefield. And those are the people who just planted a new vineyard, just got married, all these different things are exceptions to war. And then the Torah tells us someone who is Hayari v'harach levav, someone who's afraid to go and interact with war. So the Mefarshim try to figure out, what does this mean that you're afraid? So some say it's a machlokas in the Gemara. Either it means that you are literally afraid and it's just a morale killer, right? It's a morale killer if you have someone that's just terrified in the middle of battle. It's not going to help everyone else around them. Mahavdil, you have a sports team, right? We always like to give some sports muscles. So you have a sports team, and you have, very tense moments. It's crunch time, and there's one person on the court that's just like shivering and terrified to touch the ball. You don't want that person on the court because it's just not good for everybody else. So you want to keep this person away. But then the Gemara tells us that what does it mean that someone's afraid? It means that they're afraid of their sins. What does it mean to be afraid of their sins? So the Gemara tells us even being mafsik bein tefillin shel yad letefillin shel rosh, that's the barometer of someone who's not allowed to go to war. And everyone asks the question, if that's the barometer of sin that keeps people away from war, we are going to have a very small army. So who's going to be able to go to war? What does this even mean? No one's going to be able to go. What's the pshat? And the Kutzker has an unbelievable idea, which I think about all the time. The Kutzker explains that if you look at the Gemara doesn't say someone who's afraid of their sins and stops. The Gemara says someone who's afraid of the averos shebiyado, that are in their hand. What does this mean? Says the Kutzker, we're talking about someone who did tshuva. They sinned, they did tshuva, they've been forgiven. Everyone's moved on, God's moved on, everyone's past it except for that person themselves. That person has not been able to forgive himself. He's holding on to the sin. Someone who goes to battle with that guilt, thinking, I'm nothing, I'm a nobody, I'm worthless, I'm deserving of nothing, I should probably die in this battle. That person is not someone who should be going to war. And I think when it comes to Nirtza, we find something very interesting. When we go to Nirtza, where else in halacha, in our vast holidays of Judaism or Shabbos, anything, daily davening, do we ever have this concept of a Nirtza, where we're basically saying, Hashem accepted our prayers. We went through these 14 steps where we lay it out. It's like, we say exactly what we're going to do. It's the scavenger hunt where we know all of the steps. And we lay it all out. We put in our time, our blood, our sweat, our tears. There's so much going in. Blood is a bad idea. But there is so much going in to Seder night, so much prep, so much time, so much effort. And we do it all, and then finally we say, Hashem, we hope you accepted it. But we don't find this anywhere else. And let's say the answer is no, so we're going to redo it. What exactly is the gameplay over here? What's the game plan over here? What are we trying to say? What are we trying to highlight? What exactly is it that we're trying to accomplish with Nirtza? Why do we have it over here where we don't have it by other things? And then there are other types of questions that I think we'll be able to build towards with this idea that we're going to develop, which is, stealing the afikomen. What exactly is that all about? Rosh Hashanah didn't like to call it stealing the afikomen because we don't want to encourage stealing in any capacity, but we know that this is something based on the Gemara in Pesach on Daf Koftes. The Gemara says chot v'nes amatzos. So we try to do this so we won't fall asleep. What exactly are we trying to accomplish by hiding the afikomen? So the Brisker Haggadah talks about the fact that this is really a zecher to the kachim, where it's not supposed to be in certain areas. Okay, a lot to discuss, but what exactly is behind the stealing of the afikomen that we talk about? And then we know we have the arba banim, keneged arba banim, and we know, based on this yisod that I was just talking about, that I like to speak about every single time, which is that we stay away from kicking people when they're down, from stay away from this extra guilt and keeping people just totally not motivated to ever be able to move forward. So we know we have this Russia who he asked a question, and what do? We're hakeh ashina. We go and punch him in the mouth, and we basically said, if you were there, you never would have left Mitzrayim. Really, I don't know, let's pump the guy up. Let's see what we could do to go and help in terms of making sure that he's able to accomplish things. What exactly is it that we're trying to accomplish? So in order to understand all of this, we got to go back again and understand what Nirtza is all about. I think when it comes to the Seder in particular, there are certain expectations that we have. Like Rabbi started with, sometimes we think and we're dreaming of what our perfect Seder would be. We think, all the family and the friends, the kids, whoever it is that we're having Seder with, they're all going to be asking these amazing questions, and we're going to be sitting, when you're taking the family picture, and maybe, that's social media nowadays, right? You're taking this, oh my gosh, what an amazing family picture. If you took a video of what was happening the second before the picture and the second after the picture, it's not always exactly what the picture looks like, right? It's a little bit different sometimes, and you got to be able to go and separate those things. And when it comes to the Seder in particular, again, so much time, blood, sweat, and tears goes into everything that we're going to, I should stop saying blood, but all this effort goes into the Seder night, and finally comes Seder night, and we go through all these steps, and we might start to think, the Yetzer Hara creeps in and says, yeah, really, that's a Seder? You're going to call that a Seder? You rushed through that, or you took too long on that, and that's going to be the Seder? And comes Nirtza at the end, and we say, no, we did a good job. That Hashem appreciates that we put in this effort, and that we have to recognize that this was pleasing to Hashem. Because you see, in life, we always have to push, we always have to be seeing what we can do better, but we have to separate that voice in our head to figure out when it's a productive voice and when it's not. When we're thinking that we need to be better, and the reaction to that is, I'm a nothing, I'm a nobody, I'm just going to stop, that's the Yetzer Hara trying to destroy you. When it's the Yetzer Hara trying to destroy you, you got to stay away from it. But when it's something which is a motivating type of thing, then that's something which is exciting. When you're around big time Talmidei Chacham, people who are motivated and using their time to the fullest, those are when you're around those types of people, you feel like uplifted and better. Oh, I want to be better. I want to push to be like this. When you're around worse things, when you're in a bad zone, let's say with the Yetzer Hara, then any type of motivating push is something which keeps you away. And that's what we're trying to go and figure out. What's the Yetzer Hara and what's not. So we have a nirtza to go and fight against the Yetzer Hara. You see, Pesach, Rabbi Sachs points out, is probably the most followed holiday. It's a fascinating concept. No matter what spectrum of Judaism you find yourself on, Pesach Seder is something which people have. I remember so clearly, talk about a chumrah that leads to a kula. You always got to be careful with, whenever you have any type of chumrah, so you always have the kula potential. And I've mentioned this in the past. I was sitting at a Seder by my in-laws a bunch of years ago, probably 10 years ago now, and I was sitting by my in-laws, and it was just us. It was like it was great, but it's not bad if no one's talking for a little bit. I don't have to be talking every second. So I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm going to do the matzah like it's supposed to be done. So I'm going to have a full shear lahachmir, and I'm going to do it without no hefsek in between. I'm going to do this and I'll have it within the proper kedei achilas pras. So I'm going to do that. So I'm going and chomping on this matzah, and all of a sudden I'm like, and it just wouldn't go down. And I ended up, I had this whatever it was. People choke on matzah sometimes. It just wouldn't go. And then next thing I know, I'm aware, but it just wouldn't go down. I had to call it salah. I'm like, oh God. And then I ended up going with Alana. It was terrible. Alana came with me and went to the ER, and they gave me an IV, and then it went down. But my chumrah ended up costing me the rest of the arba koshes and the rest of the seder. But the reason why I bring that up, just be careful. Eat matzah, swallow it, take your time, do what you got to do. That was a rough one. Anyway, the reason I bring that up is not just to embarrass myself, which is always a good thing to do, but also the reason I bring that up is because I remember being there and sitting in the room, and there was another family there that maybe had a similar incident. They were talking about their Pesach Seder, and they were talking about, this dish that that the wife made. It was filled with chicken and pork, and it was unbelievable. I'm like, wow, that's some Pesach Seder, right? Avdos l'cheiros, that's really something that's legit, right? So, but the point is that so many people keep Pesach no matter what. And you find when it goes to the Shalosh Regalim, if you had to put in order the Shalosh Regalim, who keeps what? So you have Pesach, definitely number one. Sukkot, even that, people are familiar with the first and second days of Sukkot is totally made up according to everybody else, right? You go to your employer and say, I need to take off 2 extra days for Shmini Atzeret, Shmini Atzeret, and Sukkot Torah. No, that's not a thing. And Shavuot is okay, yeah, we got the Torah right. So again, I'm not trying to downplay our Regalim. I'm talking about how the rest of the non-religious world may view them, but Pesach is the one that's there. So Rabbi Sachs points out, what's that phenomenon about? He points out that phenomenon is all about the prep. The amount of preparation you put into something is going to determine how that thing is going to be. Pesach has the most preparation, and therefore it's the most followed. And it's not shocking, and it makes a lot of sense. Ray Rosenzweig has a funny idea where he talks about this, the Gemara talks about when it comes to B'dikas Chametz, Noshim Aratzlanios. Can't trust the women when it comes to B'dikas Chametz, cleaning the house. What's pshat in that Gemara? So what does that mean? So Rabbi Rosenzweig says, here's the pshat. The pshat is that for weeks and weeks in advance, the women are cleaning the house and getting everything in order. And now comes the night of B'dikas Chametz, and all of a sudden the guy wakes up, we have a mitzvah B'dikas Chametz tonight. We got to go and check for Chametz. She's like, get out of my face. I've been doing this for weeks. And now that's why on that night, okay, we're going to have the man cover. All right, interesting. But anyway, it's the prep time that goes into this that goes and determines what it is. And we have this Yetzer Hara in our head that we're putting all this time and effort in, and all of a sudden, it wasn't good enough. And that's what we're trying to fight on this night. You see, this concept of not letting perfect be the enemy of good. I think Rabbi Fran spoke about this at the Siyam HaShas, that we think that great is the enemy of good, because everything has to line up, everything has to be perfect in order for me to serve God in the best way possible. I need to be sitting in this place, in that way, with this type of pen, this type of pencil, with this internet connection, with this laptop, with this thing, and then I'm going to be able to learn. If I just have this much money in the bank, then I'm going to be able to learn, and I'm not going to have to think about it. If I just have this type of relationship with my family, then I'll be able to do this. But when we're always waiting for the good, for the perfect, the good is never going to happen. We're just going to always be waiting for the rest of our life. And we see that this comes up all the time. The Pesach says, Vayar Elokim es kol asher asav, hinei tov ma'od. And the Medrash tells us that tov is the malach hachayim and tov ma'od is the malach hamavis. Varshim point out, it's this exact idea. Tov ma'od, if we're always waiting for the tov ma'od, then it's going to end up killing us because we're never going to find that point where we're so thrilled with everything lining up the way it's supposed to be in order to go and act the way that we have to. And we see this come up all over the Torah, this concept. The Torah tells us, when it comes to Yocheved, she places Moshe in the basket. She didn't know exactly what would happen, but this was the time that something needed to happen. It wasn't the perfect time. Of course, you would have wanted to wait for something else, but this was the time that something needed to happen, and she went and she was able to get it done. We actually find this embedded into the creation of the world, and it's fascinating. I saw it in Rabbi Simon, in his Imre Baruch. Rabbi Simon has Sfarim on everything. He actually has a Sefer on Pesach that's going to be coming out next Pesach because it didn't ship in time, but he has a Haggadah, and in one of the Parshas Sfarim, though, I found, he has on each of the Parshas, he's working on the Moadim. He's awesome. Anyway, in his Imre Baruch, he's got sources from everywhere. I remember going into the YU, he was on the 5th floor of the library where he would kind of write, obviously he was in the base medrash in the morning and afternoon, whatever it was, but when he would be working on his Sfarim, he was in the 5th floor of the library, which has every Sefer, and he'd have stacks of books it was unbelievable to watch, just to even see his side, just to see his Sfarim lined up was amazing. But Rabbi Simon points out something very interesting from the Amudei HaSheva, from Rabbi Tzal of Corbin, and he points to the Arizal, which says that Moshe Rabbeinu lived 120 years, as we know. This is the 120 that we're always talking about. Moshe Rabbeinu lived 120 years. Why 120? So he points out that we know, Chazal teach us that the world is supposed to exist for how many years? For 6,000 years. So 120 out of 6,000 is 1/50th. And he said that Moshe Rabbeinu was a truma to the world. Moshe Rabbeinu was the ultimate in human beings. Moshe Rabbeinu was a truma for the world. So he was 1/50th. We know that truma could either be 1/40th, 1/50th, or 1/60th. So Moshe Rabbeinu was the Midah Beinunis, and he was the truma for the world. That's why he had to live 120 years. Now, Moshe Rabbeinu at the end of his life was asking for some more years. He said, Lo amos ki echye. I don't want to die because I want to live. Ki is gematria 30, right? Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't just asking for a random amount of years. Moshe Rabbeinu was asking for an extra 30 years. Why was he asking for 150 years? Because then it would be 1/40th. Moshe Rabbeinu said, why do I have to be the Beinunis? Why can't I be the Iddis? Why can't I be the best? Why can't I have the most amount of years? If I'm going to be the Truma, that's fine, but why can't I be the ideal part of the Truma? Why can't I be that? And to this, Hashem said back, nope, because the world, when it was created, wasn't created in the ideal way. Remember, the Chazal teach us that ideally it was supposed to be created with Midas Hadin. Once Hashem saw that we were not able to exist with Midas Hadin, which is the existence that we're in, and we have to appreciate that we're in this existence, so what could we do? There's nothing more that we could do about that. That's not the ideal, so we're going to live in this Beinoni existence, so to speak, and that's why Moshe Rabbeinu can't have these extra years. And it's just a fascinating back and forth that goes through with Lo Amos Kiyeche. What exactly is this back and forth? It's time. No, give me more time. What does that mean, give me more time? That's what Moshe Rabbeinu was referring to. Hashem intended to create the world with this Midas Hadin, but he wasn't able to. And we find this in creation itself. Every single day of creation had something which did not go according to plan. On the first day, Hashem hid the original light because it was too powerful. On the second day, the waters were crying. The upper waters, the lower waters were crying because it was separated from the hires. On day 3, one of the trees disobeyed and wouldn't take root the way that it was supposed to. The moon complained. On the 5th day, the Leviathan killed its mate. On the 6th day, the angels protested when man was created. Ultimately, we had to go and defend ourselves from this creation because the Malachim were, what are you creating these people for? But no, it didn't go as planned, but we find that it still has to go. And it's something which has kept us going from generation to generation. This concept of not waiting for the perfect moment, not waiting for everything to be exactly lined up, but we got to just go and push from wherever we are and do the best we can with what we got. And we find this again with this whole story, with Yaakov coming down to Mitzrayim, and Yaakov gives the brachos. One of my other favorite, I guess I just have a lot of favorite ideas. I can't really point it out, but Yaakov goes and he has Menashe and Ephraim and Yosef's kids, and he's about to give them the bracha. And what does he do? He goes and he flips the hands. And Yosef says, Dad, what are you doing? Have you not been paying attention for the last 22 years? Last time you favored the younger one over the older one, it did not work out very well. What are you doing over here? You know, when you have the kid that's been favored in class, sometimes it's not so great for that kid because now the other kids are, resenting it. So Yosef's like, have you not been watching? What's going on over here? How could you possibly make this same mistake again? And Yaakov says back, Shtok, I know what I'm doing. And first, I'm like, what is going on in that conversation? What is happening? So Mefarshim point out that the conversation actually goes a lot deeper. How does the conversation go? So they explain that Yosef said, I'm the ultimate gullus Jew, and I have these 2 children. I have Menashe and Ephraim. So why was Menashe named? Menashe was named Kinashani Elokim Es Kol Amaliv Es Kol Beis Avi. Right? I want to forget all of the bad that happened to me. I want to go and stay away. And what's Ephraim? Ephraim is Kifrani, right? Because I want to go and celebrate all of these amazing things that have happened. I want to go and accomplish and continue to do more. So we have Sur Merah, which is Menashe, staying away from bad, and we have Asei Tov, which is Ephraim, which is going and doing good. So comes Yosef and he says, I'm the ultimate Gullus Jew. I grew up in Gullus. You want to go and succeed in Gullus? You know what you have to do? Stay away from the bad. Get out of all of this negativity and then go into the positivity. Give the bracha first to Menashe, then give it to Ephraim. And Yaakov says, hey, my man, you're great. Yosef, I love you and all, but you're not the only one who grew up in tough circumstances. I grew up with a Esav, and I lived with a Lavan for quite some time. And you know what I learned? That if you wait for Kinashani, if you're going to wait for the Menashe, if you're going to wait for that perfect moment in order to go and start accomplishing, you're never going to do anything. You're never going to be able to accomplish anything. It doesn't work like that. You have to jump in. You have to go and get to the Sur Merah, the staying away from bed, through an Asei Tov. And I think it's so important for all of our lives. If you're going to always wait for that perfect moment, you're never going to have anything there. You're always going to be waiting. You're always going to be waiting. You got to just jump in, and then eventually things will come. This consistency is something which we strive for. It's an ideal. It's a goal, but it's not something which we have to wait for in order to go and be able to accomplish. And Yaakov says this is how we have to bless our children every single week. Okay, you might have things that you struggle with, but you got to keep going. Just keep pushing. Okay, how could you be the same person that struggles with X, Y, or Z and then comes to a shear and then comes down? And the answer is yes, you could. And it's going to take some time, but you're going to get there. And you got to keep pushing. You got to do what you got to do. This is something which we try to interact with. Now, Nirtza again, with all of this, Nirtza again is Hashem saying, I loved the Seder, but the question is, did you love the Seder? What was your reaction to the Seder? You're only doing the best you can with the situation that you're in. Someone was tired, someone was cranky, someone was hungry. You have whatever it is, you're around family. You gotta enjoy it. It's kind of like, Rabbi Leibowitz likes to say, it's like the Disney World. You know, you go to Disney World, and as a parent, I have a very different perspective on this. I went to Disney, it was the longest day of my life. The longest day of my life. I don't know how my parents ever did this. The longest day of my life. But you get that picture or two, and then all of a sudden it's the greatest memory. Right? You get to choose what type of memory you're gonna have in that type of situation. So yeah, maybe it was a long day. Maybe it didn't go exactly according to plan. This line was too long, or it was hot, it was this, it was raining. Okay, but you get that picture, and now you have the opportunity to go and tap into that. The Seder Rav Asher Weiss points out is like, you know how we don't know phone numbers anymore, right? We just have the contacts in. So Seder night is when we put in our contacts to be able to tap into our emunah and bitachon for the rest of the year. That's when we have the opportunity to go and do so. Someone was just telling me yesterday in shul that the gematria of sirens, whatever word they use for sirens, is the same as emunah and bitachon. I don't know. Interesting. All right, gotta look into that. But there's a lot there. Now, using that, we can understand Nirtza, what we're trying to highlight. What about the Ben Rasha? So when it comes to the Ben Rasha, what exactly are we trying to accomplish with this guy? Why are we putting him so down? We should go and try to build the guy up. What exactly is it that we're trying to do? So we know that there's something which I always like to say. I've definitely said this on a lot of rabbinic interviews when people ask me certain things of, you know, what would you say in this situation? So I always start out by saying there are two people you could have say the exact same thing to you. One person you want to like give them the biggest hug in the world. The other person you want to snap across the face. What's the difference? The difference is the context of the relationship. Do you want to like that person or do you not want to like that person? If you want to like that person, some comment, oh my gosh, I can't believe he's so silly. He's such an eccentric guy, you know that. But if you don't want to like the person, like, that's disgusting. How could that person say that to me? And it's just like something interesting and important to think about. So the Chacham and the Rosh didn't say something all that different. So yeah, he excluded himself from the Chal. Okay. So we're going to go and, deny him forever and say, oh, you would have been left in Mitzrayim. What's going on over here? So what happens is that when someone feels like they're excluded, when someone feels like they're excluding themselves from the cloud, there's a lot of that built up guilt. There's a lot of that feeling like, I don't belong. I can't be here. So what we're trying to say is that if you kept that mentality, if we would have been in Mitzrayim and we would have had the mentality that you have right now, that you're low and you're down and therefore you don't belong, we never would have left Mitzrayim. Why? Because we were on the 49th level of Tumah. We weren't where we felt like maybe we would have needed to be in order to get redeemed, but Hashem redeemed us anyway. Okay, we may have slipped up because of that. We weren't ready for certain things, and certain things were maybe above us, whatever it was, but Hashem gave that to us anyway. If we kept this mentality of the Rasha, we never would have ever gotten out of Mitzrayim because we would have been waiting for that perfect moment. I think about that a lot now. You look at what percentage of the world is Jews, very, very small percentage, right? I've mentioned this in drushes a few times that I've always thought, like if you went to a random person in Idaho or wherever it was, that if you asked them how many Jews there are in the world, they'd probably say a few billion based on the news. Nowadays, it's probably like 90% of the world has got to be Jews because, just how much news is out there. But then I felt vindicated by Joe Rogan, right? And when I see that clip from Rogan where someone said, how many Jews do you think there are in the world? And he said, probably 1 billion. And he's like, do you know how many really? And he's like, what? He's like, about 15 million. He's like, yeah, okay. Look that up. And he was blown away because we know that this is the feeling. We know that there's sometimes that it just feels like it's absolutely crazy how many Jews are in the world. And you look around, even let's say 15 million Jews. How many of them are Orthodox? Not all that many. Right? We think about how many different sects of Judaism we have within our communities. The diversity from one side of Lawrence to the other side of Lawrence, just within the 5 towns. And you think of how many different sections and schools and everything there are. We're such a small percentage, aside from the world, we're such a small percentage of the Jewish people. And you start to think all these wars, and we're thinking, there's so much like Geula types of stuff. And you look around, obviously we look at ourselves first. And I'm I know for myself, I'm when I'm thinking of the Geula, I'm thinking I'm having perfect days. I'm thinking that I'm whatever it is. And we start to think could it really be? But then we remember that the Jews were redeemed from Mitzrayim, 49th level of Tumah. That means they were in a really bad place. Mitzrayim was Shtufei Zima. Mitzrayim was the worst place on earth. And then we start to think, maybe things could happen. Who knows? I don't know, something I've just been thinking about a little bit. But anyway, this is what we tell the Russia. The Russia, if we would have kept your mentality, we never would have been able to get out of Mitzrayim. So what do? We knock out his teeth. Why? What's the knocking out of the teeth? So Mefarshim point out, or we know just from human nature, that sometimes when someone's bitter and upset and feeling insecure with where they are and they feel like they don't belong, so sometimes they have a big bite. They have a big bite, but if you just dig a little deeper than the external anger and embarrassment, then you're able to tap into something of who they really are. So we say, Hake Ashino, let's get behind their teeth. Let's just, knock out the teeth, knock out that big bark. Knock out this nastiness and this disgusting element and get around it, and you'll see we can get to who the person really is, and this is what the person is really all about. How do we find that person? So we steal the Afikomen. What's stealing the Afikomen? So there's a lot of stealing that goes on Seder night, on Pesach night. We know that this is when Yaakov took the brachos from Esav. Chazal say that it was on Seder night when Esther was going in, and the whole story over there, they say it was on Seder night. There's a lot of of trickery, stealing that happens on Seder night. So what are we highlighting with this? What we're highlighting is we're stealing from that voice within ourselves that tells us that we can't do it. The Farshim point out that when we're stealing the Afikomen, we're stealing from that voice which is telling us, we're no good, we're worthless. We're going and taking it back. We're taking back the narrative that, no, we can accomplish. Okay, yeah, we've fallen, we've slipped. Whatever the Seder was, we say, Nirtza, Hashem appreciated our effort. Hashem appreciated this. Now, that does not mean that we don't have to push. It doesn't mean that we could just settle and say, okay, we're fine where we are, we don't ever have to do anything. No, but we need to push in a healthy way. We need to push in a way that's going to get us to where we need to get to go. And that's ultimately what we're trying to accomplish. Where we can't have the guilt take over our Seder, take over our lives, we have to appreciate each thing as it's happening. I think we can have a connected idea as well, which is now back to Bedikas Chametz. Not exactly the same, but something back to Bedikas Chametz. Sfas Emes points out a classic idea that when it comes to Bedikas Chametz, so we know we use or basar, we're supposed to use the candle and not the lights, right? The flesh, what's considered a light, what's considered not, fine. So historically, growing up, you have the candle, you have the feather, you have the stick, you have the bag. So everything needs to be burnt, right? Everything needs to be burnt. So I can understand, says the Sfas Emes, why the bread and anything that touches the bread needs to be burnt. But why does the candle need to be burnt? The candle didn't do anything, it's just there for light. What's the purpose of it being burnt? So Sfas Emes points out that anything in life that is there specifically just to find chametz, if you're just there to find negativity, that's chametz also that needs to be burnt. Meaning, in life, if we're always and only looking for negativity, then we need to make sure that we are understanding that that's not the right perspective to have. Because when we're looking for reasons to complain, guess what? You're going to find them. There's always something to complain about. There's always something to be bitter about. But if that's what you're looking for, if that's what you spend your life looking for, that's treif, that's chametz, that we got to burn. We got to get rid of that mentality. Fascinating. Kind of shifts what exactly it is that we're trying to do. This is what Farshim, the Kushn Sarmagid, takes us even further. He says that the Mishnah tells us that you only have to go and bring or do a bedikas chametz in a place where you brought chametz, which means that you can't go and judge other people's lives. You've brought chametz into your own life. We have enough things that we have to worry about within ourselves. So I can't go into your life and I didn't bring the chametz into your life, so you can't go and do a bedikas chametz over there. That's not my role. That's not my job. It's not there. But to kind of close this whole thing out, we also know that the Gemara in the beginning of the Pesach says or lar basar, and the first two daf are there solely to figure out is or morning time or is it nighttime? It's a very strange machlokas. Ultimately, we end up saying that it's or lar basar is nighttime. Then why did we use the word or? Because we want to use nice language. Right? We want to make sure to create as much positivity as possible. Even while we're looking for the chametz and we're doing the b'dikas chametz, it's got to be coming from a place of positivity. Because the b'dikas chametz, obviously, we're doing the physical search, we got to get rid of it. But the mefarshim already, even the halachas svarim talk about that. The reason why we're so intense on chametz is because it represents the Yetzer Hara. So when we're going through ourselves to research and to find the Yetzer Hara within ourselves, we got to be looking at it from a positivity point of view. We can't be looking at it from the negativity, using all these bad words. We got to be able to go and look to see how we can keep it as positive as possible. So going into a Pesach, I got to stick to what I talk about, right? We got to stick to this stuff. We got to go, and we can't let anything stop us from growing. But we have to think about when these voices are telling us that we have to grow in our head. What's the reaction to that voice? Is the reaction, now I'm going to just shut off and never do anything? Because if that's the reaction, that means that's the Yetzer Hara talking. But if it's like, no, you know what? I see that this person, somehow, they have enough time in the day to do this, this, and that, so I'm going to be able to go and push a little more, and I'm going to do something better, that's probably the Yetzer Tov talking. But it's got to be coming from that point of positivity. Nirtza, at the end of the Seder, we say Hashem is happy with what we're doing. Not because, maybe he's not, maybe we should do it again. No, because we have to point out for ourselves. Hashem's happy with what we did, but are we happy with what we did? And of course, the only way we're able to take advantage of a Seder is by prep and by thinking, what can we do? So, there's different tools, different tricks to do. I know for us, we went, my wife went to one of these seminars, the Kamenetskis were talking about how they enhance their Seder. So we do this headbands game with the kid, we had some skits, we do some stuff, but I also know that my kids aren't going to be able to sit for 5 hours, and that's okay. Right? Things are, you got to know your stage, you got to know where you're at, and if you get some good time and you're able to go and talk certain things, and that's really nice. It's also important to remember that I'm pretty sure last I checked, there's no Isser to say Divrei Torah at the other meals of Pesach. It's really nice to go and talk at the Seder, but you got to figure out what's for the Seder, what's not, and you got to think about these things. You're allowed to talk Divrei Torah the rest of the time also, but now's the time to really have the fundamental questions and to really talk about our Masorah, to give over stories, to give over the previous generations, who we are and what we're all about. So there's a lot really to look forward to. And Mitch so much to be able to take advantage of every moment, but appreciate that whatever it was, and we got to build on it and grow from it and use that voice just to help us. Everyone should have a wonderful, wonderful day.